The Holocaust was one of the darkest chapters in human history, where 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime during World War II. Central to this genocide was the Nazis' ability to identify, locate, and round up Jewish people, not only within Germany, but across the territories they occupied. This process was meticulously organized and involved a combination of legal, bureaucratic, and brutal methods. This video explores the multiple ways the Nazis were able to find Jews, from their rise to power in Germany to their genocidal campaign across Europe. The systematic persecution of Jews started almost immediately after Adolf Hitler rose to power in 1933. Over the next few years, the Nazi regime passed a series of laws that stripped Jews of their rights, beginning with the Aryan Paragraph, which banned Jews from working in public offices, schools, and civil service jobs. These early laws laid the foundation for isolating Jews from German society, making them easier to identify and target. A key moment in the Nazi campaign was the passage of the Nuremberg Laws in 1935, which legally defined who was Jewish based on ancestry. These laws stated that anyone with 3 or more Jewish grandparents was considered Jewish, regardless of whether they practiced Judaism. This racial classification allowed the Nazis to systematically identify Jews, regardless of their cultural or religious identity. Under the Nuremberg Laws, Jews were stripped of German citizenship. They were forbidden from marrying or having relationships with Aryans, and prohibited from holding positions in many professions, further isolating them from German society. To further isolate Jews, the Nazis introduced a series of measures to make Jewish people easily identifiable in everyday life. This labeling system was key to the Nazis' efforts to find and deport Jews later on. In 1938, Jewish passports were confiscated and marked with a large red J to immediately identify Jewish individuals during any travel or document checks. This stamp made it difficult for Jews to escape Germany or flee to other countries, as their passports immediately marked them as targets. In 1939, the Nazis issued a decree that all Jewish men had to adopt the first name Israel, and all Jewish women had to adopt the first name Sarah. This forced renaming was designed to further dehumanize Jews and mark them as outsiders in society. It also made it easier for Nazi officials and collaborators to identify Jews through legal documents or during interrogations. Starting in 1941, Jews in Germany and Nazi-occupied territories were required to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing. This visible marker made it impossible for Jews to blend into the non-Jewish population. It also facilitated their persecution by making them easy to spot on the streets, in public places, and during Nazi raids. The Nazis were extremely bureaucratic, relying on extensive documentation and records to find Jews. Throughout Europe, many countries kept detailed records of their populations, including information on religion and ethnicity. Nazi authorities seized these records during the occupation of various countries. Many countries, including Germany, had conducted censuses that included information on religion. Jews were often identified in these records, providing the Nazis with lists of Jewish residents. Local tax records and property registries also offered clues, allowing the Nazis to pinpoint the locations of Jewish-owned homes, businesses, and other assets. In many European countries, Jewish communities were legally required to maintain membership lists. These registries were often seized by the Nazis during their occupations. Synagogue records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and other religious documents were used to trace Jewish ancestry. Medical and government records also proved useful to the Nazis in identifying Jews. Hospitals and health services had records that indicated religion, and in some cases, information about Jewish lineage was included in public health records. This information allowed the Nazis to find Jews even if they were trying to hide their identity. In Nazi-occupied territories, the Nazis often relied on the cooperation of local governments, police, and civilians to help them identify and round up Jews. This collaboration was essential, especially in Eastern European countries, where Jewish populations were large and well integrated. In countries like France, Poland, and the Netherlands, local police forces were often enlisted to carry out the arrest and deportation of Jews. Many local authorities complied with Nazi orders due to fear, anti-Semitism, or the desire to maintain their positions of power under the occupation. In many cases, Jews were betrayed by their own neighbors or acquaintances. Whether out of greed, in exchange for rewards, fear of Nazi reprisals, or anti-Semitic sentiment, non-Jews would inform the authorities about Jews who were in hiding. The Nazis often incentivized this with financial rewards, food rations, or promises of leniency for those who provided useful information. The SS, Schutzstaffel, under Heinrich Himmler's command, played a central role in identifying, deporting, and murdering Jews. Within the SS, several groups were tasked with locating Jews, particularly in the occupied territories of Eastern Europe. The Einsatzgruppen were Nazi paramilitary death squads responsible for mass shootings of Jews, communists, and other undesirables. After the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, the Einsatzgruppen followed the German army into newly occupied areas, systematically rounding up and executing Jews. They relied heavily on local informants and collaborators to locate Jews in rural areas. In Eastern Europe, the Nazis established ghettos, walled-off areas where Jews were forcibly concentrated. Jews were often rounded up from rural areas and relocated to these ghettos, making them easier to control and eventually deport to extermination camps. Ghettos were created in cities like Warsaw, Lodz, and Vilna, where thousands of Jews were packed into overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. The ghettos served as temporary holding areas before the Jews were sent to death camps. Once Jews were located and rounded up, they were deported to concentration camps and extermination camps as part of the Nazis' final solution to the so-called Jewish question. The Gestapo, Nazi secret police, was instrumental in locating hidden Jews within Germany and other occupied territories. They conducted raids on homes, inspected identity papers, and interrogated suspects. They had the authority to arrest Jews on suspicion and send them to concentration camps without trial. Once identified, Jews were packed into cattle cars and deported to concentration camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Nazi propaganda played a significant role in turning the German public and citizens of occupied territories against Jews. Jews were dehumanized in Nazi-controlled media, portrayed as threats to society, and blamed for Germany's economic and political problems. This made it easier for the Nazis to justify their actions and for local populations to accept or even participate in the persecution of Jews. The fear of Nazi retaliation was also a powerful tool. Citizens were threatened with severe punishment, including death, if they were caught hiding Jews or failing to report their whereabouts. This climate of fear ensured widespread compliance with Nazi orders. The Nazis' ability to find and persecute Jews was rooted in a combination of bureaucracy, propaganda, and coercion. They leveraged legal systems, local collaborators, and extensive documentation to locate Jewish populations. The systematic, organized nature of this genocide was key to the scale of the Holocaust, making it possible for the Nazis to carry out the mass murder of 6 million Jews with chilling efficiency.